I'm Rachel Michelle, 31, and yesterday I became the youngest judge in our county's history. It should have been the proudest moment of my life, but instead, I'll forever remember it as the day my cousin Megan slapped me across the face on the courthouse steps, calling me a filthy animal in front of my new colleagues. The inheritance dispute that tore our family apart had finally erupted into public violence, but what Megan didn't know was that her very actions would strengthen my resolve. With her handprint still burning on my cheek, I walked through those doors, put on my robe, and took the judge's seat anyway. Before I tell you how I went from being slapped at the courthouse steps to sitting on the judge's bench, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to rise above family drama to achieve your dreams. Growing up in Millfield, Ohio wasn't extraordinary by any means. My parents worked hard, dad as a high school math teacher and mom as a nurse at the local hospital. We lived comfortably but modestly in a 3-bedroom house with a small backyard where I spent countless summer afternoons reading under the shade of an old oak tree. What made my childhood special was my maternal grandmother, Alina. She had worked as a legal secretary for over 40 years at the county's most prestigious law firm and possessed a sharp mind that never dulled, even in her later years. Grandma Alina lived just 3 blocks away, and I'd often walk to her house after school. Her living room shelves were lined with legal books, gifts from the attorneys she'd worked with, and she knew more about law than most of the lawyers themselves. The law isn't just about rules, Rachel, she would tell me while sharing cookies and milk at her kitchen table. It's about fairness. It's about making sure everyone gets treated with dignity. Those afternoons at Grandma Alina's planted the first seeds of my interest in law. My cousin Megan was 2 years older than me. Her mother was Mom's sister, Aunt Patricia, who had married into money. Uncle David owned a successful real estate development company, and they lived in a sprawling house in the wealthy part of town with an in-ground pool and vacations to Europe every summer. The contrast between our families was stark. While I wore hand-me-downs and shopped at discount stores, Megan wore designer clothes and complained when she didn't get the latest gadgets immediately. During family gatherings, these differences were impossible to ignore. Rachel, honey, are those the same jeans you wore last Christmas? Aunt Patricia would ask, not unkindly but with poorly disguised pity. We should take you shopping sometime. Megan was worse, showing off her new expensive items with an air of superiority. Daddy says I can have a car when I turn 16. What will you get, Rachel? A bus pass, she would laugh as if making a joke, but the intention to wound was clear. Despite this, we were close as young children. We'd play together during family gatherings, and in those early years, the economic difference didn't matter much. That changed as we entered our teens and Megan became increasingly aware of social status. Grandma Alina noticed everything but never commented directly on Megan's behavior. Instead, she invested extra time in me, seeing something that others didn't. You have a good heart and a strong mind, Rachel. Those are things money can't buy, she would tell me when I felt inferior after family gathering. By high school, I was at the top of my class, working hard for scholarships while also helping at the local legal aid office where Grandma had connections. Meanwhile, Megan coasted through a private school, her average grades overlooked because of her family's donation. When my grandfather passed away during my junior year, the first hints of inheritance tension surfaced. Grandma Alina was now alone in their house, and discussions about her will became a taboo topic that nevertheless occupied everyone's thoughts. Mom should move in with us, Aunt Patricia declared at a family dinner. That house is too big for her alone, and she could invest the money from selling it. I'm perfectly capable of living independently, Grandma responded firmly, and I'll decide what happens to my house and savings when the time comes. I caught Megan watching me with suspicion after that exchange, as if I might be somehow manipulating Grandma for future gain. When I announced my intention to attend law school after college, Megan rolled her eyes. Of course you're going to law school. Grandma has brainwashed you completely. I'm going because I love the law, I defended myself, and because I want to help people. Yeah, right, Megan scoffed. We all know you're just trying to impress Grandma for the inheritance. Her accusation stung because it was so far from the truth. I had genuinely grown to love legal studies, spending hours discussing landmark cases with Grandma Alina. I'd developed my own passion for justice that had nothing to do with money. The reality was that I would need scholarships and loans to make law school possible. My parents could contribute only a small amount, and I was prepared to work my way through school if necessary. When I shared these worries with Grandma, she squeezed my hand. "You focus on your studies, Rachel. The rest will work itself out," she said with a knowing smile that I didn't fully understand until years later. College was a financial balancing act. I had earned a partial academic scholarship to State University, but it barely covered tuition. To manage living expenses, I juggled 3 part-time jobs: morning shifts at a coffee shop, weekend receptionist at a local law firm, and evening tutoring for undergraduate students. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. Meanwhile, Megan attended Westfield University, a private institution with ivy-covered buildings and a network of wealthy alumni. Her parents covered all expenses, including a fully furnished off-campus apartment and a new car. Our lives couldn't have been more different. During Thanksgiving break of my sophomore year, the contrast between us reached a boiling point. The family had gathered at Aunt Patricia and Uncle David's house for dinner. I arrived late, having worked a morning shift before driving 2 hours to make it in time. "Finally decided to join us," Megan commented as I hung my coat. "We were about to send a search party." "Sorry, I had to work this morning," I explained, too tired to match her sarcasm. During dinner, conversations turned to our college experiences. Megan enthusiastically described the sorority parties and exclusive social events that dominated her calendar. When asked about my experience, I mentioned my work schedule and a constitutional law class I particularly enjoyed. "God, Rachel, your life sounds so depressing," Megan interrupted. "All work and studying at that cheap state school. College is supposed to be fun." "Not everyone has parents who can pay for everything," I replied, uncharacteristically sharp due to exhaustion. "Well, maybe if your parents had made better career choices," she began before her father cut her off with a stern look. The damage was done. A painful silence fell over the table, and though Uncle David forced Megan to apologize, the tension remained for the rest of the evening. Our relationship never fully recovered from that moment. As college progressed, I maintained my dean's list standing despite my work schedule. During my senior year, I received the news that would change my trajectory. I had been awarded a substantial scholarship to attend the law school at State University, based on my academic performance and recommendations, including one from a judge I had met through Grandma Leaner's connection. When I called Grandma to share the news, she invited me over for a special dinner. Upon arriving, I found her surrounded by stacks of leather-bound law books. "These are for you," she said, gesturing to the impressive collection. "I've been saving them. Some were gifts from the attorneys I worked with, others I purchased over the years. They belong with someone who will appreciate them." "Grandma, I can't take all these," I protested, overwhelmed by the generosity and the value of what appeared to be first editions of classic legal text. "Of course you can. They're gathering dust here, and you'll put them to good use," she insisted. "I always knew you were meant for this path, Rachel." When Megan learned about the book collection, her reaction was predictable. "She gave you her entire law library. Those books are worth thousands of dollars. That should have been divided among the family." "They're educational materials that I'll actually use," I explained. "It's not like she gave me jewelry or money." "It's always something special for precious Rachel," she snapped. "The rest of us just don't matter to Grandma." During this time, Grandma Leaner's health began to decline gradually. Nothing serious, just the normal slowing down of aging. I made sure to visit her at least twice a week, helping with groceries, taking her to doctor appointments, and simply keeping her company. We would discuss my classes, and she would share stories from her years at the law firm, providing insights that textbooks couldn't offer. Megan's visits to Grandma became increasingly rare and performative. She would show up on holidays with expensive gifts that often missed the mark, like the complicated coffee machine Grandma never learned to use or the tablet that remained in its box. These visits were brief and usually ended with Megan mentioning some social engagement she couldn't miss. The real breaking point came at Grandma Leaner's 80th birthday celebration. The family had gathered at her house for an afternoon party. I had been there since early morning, helping with preparations and ensuring Grandma didn't overexert herself. Megan arrived an hour late, making a grand entrance with an ostentatious gift and immediately dominating conversation. During cake and coffee, Aunt Patricia mentioned how wonderful it was that I had been accepted to law school. "Grandma must be so proud to have a lawyer in the family," she commented. "Rachel isn't a lawyer yet," Megan corrected sharply. And let's be honest, she only got in because she's been Grandma's favorite since forever. A hush fell over the room. I sat frozen, mortified by the public accusation. That's quite enough, Grandma Leaner said, her voice quiet but commanding. Rachel earned her scholarship through hard work and dedication. I'm proud of her because she has shown determination and character, not because she's my favorite. Oh please, Megan scoffed. We all know she only visits you so often because she's after your money. At least I'm honest about not having time to come by every week. Megan, Aunt Patricia gasped. It's fine, I said, though it wasn't. I should check on the coffee. I escaped to the kitchen, hands shaking as I gripped the counter. Grandma followed me moments later. Don't let her get to you, she said gently. Jealousy speaks more about the person feeling it than about you. I don't understand why she hates me so much, I whispered. I've never done anything to her. Sometimes simply being yourself is enough to make others uncomfortable if they're not secure in who they are, Grandma replied, patting my hand. You keep focusing on your path. The rest doesn't matter. After that day, Megan and I essentially stopped communicating except when absolutely necessary at family functions. Our cousin's relationship had deteriorated beyond repair, with years of resentment and misunderstanding creating a chasm neither of us knew how to bridge. The call came during my second year of law school. Mom's voice trembled on the phone as she told me Grandma Leaner had suffered a major stroke and was in the hospital. I immediately packed a bag and drove the 2 hours back to Millfield, my mind racing with fear and regret about the paper I'd postponed writing to visit her the previous weekend. Grandma looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped and hummed in the quiet room. The strong, wise woman who had guided me through life was suddenly vulnerable, her usually alert eyes now closed and still. The doctors explained that while she had survived the initial stroke, the damage was extensive. We're making her comfortable, the neurologist said gently, but you should prepare yourselves. I took a leave of absence from school and moved back into my parents' house to be at Grandma's side every day. Professors were understanding, allowing me to submit assignments remotely and reschedule exams. For 3 weeks, I split my time between the hospital and studying in the waiting room, determined not to fall behind while also being present for Grandma. Megan visited twice. The first time was brief. She stayed for 20 minutes, clearly uncomfortable with the medical setting, before claiming she had an important work meeting. The second visit was longer but seemed more for show, as she arrived with Aunt Patricia and posed for a photo holding Grandma's hand that later appeared on her social media with a heartfelt caption about family bond. Has Megan been by often? Grandma asked me during a rare moment of lucidity. She's been busy, I answered diplomatically, not wanting to upset her. You're a terrible liar, Rachel, Grandma said with a weak smile. Always have been. It's why you'll make a good judge someday. A judge? I haven't even finished law school yet. Trust me on this one, she whispered before drifting back to sleep. Those were among the last coherent words she spoke to me. 3 days later, with our family gathered around her bed, Grandma Leaner passed peacefully in her sleep. I felt a piece of myself go with her, a hollow emptiness that no amount of preparation could have prevented. The funeral was well attended, with lawyers, judges, and courthouse staff coming to pay respects to the woman who had been a fixture in the local legal community for decades. I was asked to deliver a eulogy, which I somehow managed without completely breaking down, sharing stories of Grandma's wisdom, humor, and unwavering support. Megan spoke after me, her voice breaking as she described childhood memories of baking cookies with Grandma. It seemed genuine until she pivoted to talking about how close they had remained, despite the distance, a claim that those of us who knew the truth found difficult to hear without wincing. Grandma always made time for everyone in the family, Megan emphasized, with a pointed look in my direction. She never played favorites. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface throughout the funeral preparations now threatened to boil over. After the service, as family gathered at Aunt Patricia's house, I overheard Megan talking to a distant relative. It's been so hard seeing her decline, she was saying. I visited as often as I could, but with my job in marketing, it was difficult to get away. Rachel had more flexibility with her schedule, being a student and all. I bit my tongue and walked away, unwilling to create a scene that would dishonor Grandma's memory. The following week would bring enough drama without my contribution. 7 days after the funeral, we gathered at Mr. Harrington's law office for the reading of Grandma Leaner's will. The small conference room felt crowded with family members, the air thick with unspoken expectations. Mr. Harrington, who had been Grandma's attorney and friend for 30 years, adjusted his glasses and began reading the formal legal document. The first several provisions were straightforward personal items to various family members, charitable donations to the Legal Aid Society and the public library. Then came the substantive bequest. To my granddaughter, Rachel Michelle, I leave my house at 247 Maple Street, including all furnishings, as well as my savings and investment accounts, with the hope that these resources will support her continued education and future legal career. A shocked silence fell over the room, broken only by Megan's audible gasp. I sat stunned, unable to process what I'd just heard. The house alone was worth at least $300,000, and I had no idea how much was in Grandma's accounts. This is bullshit, Megan suddenly exploded, jumping to her feet. She manipulated Grandma for years for this exact outcome. Megan, please, Aunt Patricia attempted to calm her daughter. No, we all know what happened here. Rachel played the devoted granddaughter while the rest of us had actual lives and responsibilities. This was her plan all along. That's not true, I finally found my voice. I had no idea Grandma was leaving me anything. Liar, Megan shouted, tears streaming down her face. You've been working Grandma for years. Visiting her all the time, talking about law school, making her think you were so special while making the rest of us look bad. That's quite enough, Mr. Harrington intervened firmly. Alina was of sound mind when she prepared this will last year. She explained her decisions to me in detail, and I can assure you they were made thoughtfully and deliberately. We'll contest it, Uncle David declared, putting an arm around his distraught daughter. Alina was clearly influenced unduly. You're welcome to try, Mr. Harrington replied calmly. But I should inform you that Alina anticipated this reaction and prepared a detailed letter explaining her reasoning, which will become part of the court record should you pursue that course of action. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Aunt Patricia tried to reason with my parents, suggesting I should do the right thing and share the inheritance equally. Mom and Dad, caught in an impossible position between siblings and loyalty to me, attempted to mediate without success. I left the office feeling sick to my stomach, not with guilt but with sadness that Grandma's final act of generosity had become a source of such bitterness. At home, I found a sealed envelope among the personal items Mr. Harrington had given me, addressed in Grandma's distinctive handwriting. Dear Rachel, the letter began, if you're reading this, then the will reading went exactly as I expected. Don't let their reactions make you doubt yourself or my decision. You earned this through years of genuine love and support, not through manipulation as they might suggest. The house has been in our family for generations, and I know you'll honor its history. The money should help with your remaining law school expenses and give you a start in life without the crushing debt that holds back so many promising legal careers. My only request is that you use these gifts to continue pursuing justice with the same passion and integrity you've always shown. I am so proud of the woman you've become. All my love, Grandma. I cried myself to sleep that night, clutching the letter to my chest. In the following weeks, the family split into factions. My parents tried to remain neutral while supporting me privately. Two of my mother's brothers sided with Aunt Patricia and Megan, while others felt Grandma's wishes should be respected. Despite threats of legal action, Uncle David and Aunt Patricia ultimately decided not to contest the will after their attorney reviewed Mr. Harrington's documentation of Grandma's mental competence and her detailed explanation of her decisions. The inheritance was substantial. The house, fully paid off, and almost $175,000 in savings and investment. I used the money exactly as Grandma had intended, paying off my law school loans and carefully renovating her house to preserve its character while updating necessary systems. I moved in after graduation, finding comfort in the familiar surroundings filled with memories of her. The family rift, however, only deepened. Megan refused to attend any gathering where I would be present, forcing relatives to choose sides for holiday celebrations. Months later, I learned through the grapevine that she had filed an anonymous ethics complaint with the State Bar Association, questioning my character and fitness to practice law based on manipulation of an elderly relative for financial gain. The complaint was investigated and dismissed for lack of evidence, but the knowledge that my own cousin would go to such lengths was devastating. After passing the bar exam with honors, I accepted a position as a public defender in the county courthouse. The starting salary was modest compared to what corporate firms offered, but the work aligned with my values and Grandma Leaner's belief in equal justice. Thanks to her inheritance, I could afford to take the job without worrying about student loan payments. My first year was challenging but fulfilling. I represented clients who couldn't afford attorneys, often facing an overwhelmed system that processed people more than it delivered justice. These were long, the emotional toll substantial, but I never regretted my choice. Each time I helped someone navigate the complex legal system, I felt Grandma Leaner's approving presence. Meanwhile, Megan drifted between marketing jobs, never staying at one company for more than a year. Through family gossip, I heard she had been fired twice for conflicts with management and was increasingly bitter about her career trajectory. While I took no pleasure in her struggles, there was a certain irony in how our paths had diverged from her earlier prediction. Family gatherings remained awkward affairs. Thanksgiving and Christmas became complicated negotiations about who would attend which event. My parents tried valiantly to repair the rift, inviting both sides to dinner parties that inevitably ended with strained conversation and early departure. "I just don't understand why she still hates me so much," I confided to Mom after one particularly tense Easter lunch. "It's been 3 years since Grandma died. Isn't it time to move on?" "Some people find it easier to blame others than to look at themselves," Mom replied gently. "Megan has always measured her worth through comparisons, and right now, your success makes her feel inadequate." "But I've never rubbed it in her face or even talked about my work around her," I protested. "You don't have to. Your existence is enough," Mom said, echoing Grandma Leaner's wisdom from years earlier. After 4 years as a public defender, my career took an unexpected turn when Judge Catherine Wilson, a respected figure in the county court and former colleague of attorneys Grandma had worked with, became my mentor. She took an interest in my cases, occasionally inviting me to her chambers to discuss legal strategies and career development. "Have you ever considered becoming a judge, Rachel?" she asked one afternoon as we reviewed a complex case. I laughed, thinking she was joking. "I'm only 29, Judge Wilson. That's decades away." "Not necessarily," she replied seriously. "The governor has been pushing to diversify the bench with younger judges who bring fresh perspectives. The county will have an opening next year when Judge Reynolds retires. You should apply." "Me? There are attorneys with twice my experience who would want that position." "Experience matters, yes, but so do judgment, temperament, and commitment to justice. You have those in abundance," she said. "Think about it. I'd be happy to recommend you." I did think about it, though not seriously at first. The idea seemed presumptuous, reaching for something I hadn't earned. Yet Judge Wilson's suggestion planted a seed that gradually took root. Over the following months, I researched the judicial appointment process, reviewed the qualifications, and assessed my readiness with ruthless honesty. What held me back wasn't just professional uncertainty but personal doubt fueled by family conflict. How could I present myself as worthy of a judgeship when my own family was so fractured? Would the selection committee see the inheritance dispute as evidence of character flaws? And deeper still, a question that haunted me, was Megan right that I had somehow manipulated Grandma Leaner's affection? I brought these concerns to Judge Wilson during a lunch meeting. "Everyone has family complications, Rachel," she said firmly. "What matters is how you've conducted yourself professionally and ethically. Your work speaks for itself." With her encouragement, I finally submitted my application for the judicial appointment 6 months later. The process was intensive, detailed written questions about my legal philosophy, thorough background checks, and multiple interviews with the selection committee. Throughout this period, I kept my application private, telling only my parents and closest friends. Nevertheless, word somehow reached Megan. I learned from my cousin Thomas that she had been making bitter comments at a family wedding I hadn't attended. "She's trying to become a judge now," Thomas reported Megan saying. "As if manipulating Grandma wasn't enough, she thinks she can sit in judgment of others." The comments stung but also strengthened my resolve. I would not allow someone else's bitterness to determine my path. During my final interview with the selection committee, when asked about handling conflicts of interest, I drew on my family experience to articulate a thoughtful response about recusal standards and maintaining judicial integrity despite personal connection. 3 weeks later, I visited Grandma Leaner's grave, bringing fresh flowers as I did every month. I sat on the small bench nearby, telling her about recent events as if she could hear me. "I don't know if I'll get the appointment," I said. "There are more experienced candidates. but I'm proud I tried. My phone rang as I was leaving the cemetery. It was the governor's office. I had been selected for the judicial appointment. At 31, I would become the youngest judge in the county's history. The first person I called was Mom, who cried with pride. Dad got on the extension, his voice thick with emotion as he congratulated me. Judge Wilson sent a congratulatory text. Alina would be so proud. I certainly am. News traveled quickly through both professional circles and family networks. Most reactions were positive, though I heard through the grapevine that Aunt Patricia had commented it was awfully convenient that my mentor had been friends with Grandma Alina. The implication of favoritism was clear, though unfounded. As my swearing-in ceremony approached, I vacillated between excitement and anxiety. This position represented everything I had worked for, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something would go wrong. The night before the ceremony, I barely slept, rehearsing my judicial oath and imagining various scenarios for my first day on the bench. Morning arrived with clear skies and mild spring temperatures. I dressed carefully in a navy suit, pinning Grandma Alina's antique brooch to my lapel for courage. My parents would meet me at the courthouse for the private swearing-in, followed by a small reception with colleagues and friends. What I didn't expect was to see Megan waiting on the courthouse steps as I arrived. The morning of my judicial investiture began with a sense of solemnity and purpose. I woke before dawn, too nervous to sleep, and spent those quiets in Grandma Alina's study, surrounded by the few law books I had kept after donating most of her collection to the county law library. The weight of the responsibility I was about to assume felt both terrifying and right. I dressed with deliberate care, a conservative black suit, minimal jewelry, and sensible heels that would be comfortable for standing through the ceremony. The only personal touch was Grandma's silver brooch, shaped like the scales of justice, which I pinned to my lapel. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized the composed, professional woman staring back at me. "You can do this," I whispered to my reflection. "This is what you were meant for." The drive to the courthouse was surreal. I had made this same journey hundreds of times as a public defender, but today everything looked different. The morning light seemed clearer, the familiar buildings more significant. I parked in the public lot rather than taking the reserved judicial space that would be mine starting tomorrow, one final act as a regular citizen before assuming the bench. As I approached the courthouse steps, I saw a small crowd gathered outside. My parents would be waiting inside, along with Judge Wilson and court staff. This group appeared to be mostly attorneys and colleagues coming to support me, and I smiled with gratitude at their presence. Then I spotted her. Megan stood slightly apart from the others, wearing an expensive-looking cream pantsuit that contrasted sharply with her flushed face. Even from a distance, I could see she was agitated, shifting her weight from foot to foot and checking her phone repeatedly. My step faltered. We hadn't been in the same place for over a year, not since a disastrous family Easter where she had refused to speak to me directly. What was she doing here? A wild hope fluttered in my chest. Perhaps she had come to reconcile, to support me on this important day despite our differences. "Megan," I said as I approached, keeping my voice neutral but extending an olive branch with her name. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I bet you didn't," she replied, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. Several people turned to watch. "I thought it was important to be here for this far." The hope withered instantly. "If you've come to cause a scene, this isn't the place," I said quietly, trying to move past her toward the doors. She stepped directly into my path. "You don't deserve this, any of it. First Grandma's money, now this position. Do you have any idea what people really think of you?" "Megan, please," I glanced around, mortified by the growing audience of courthouse staff and attorneys. "We can talk about this another time." "No, we'll talk now," she insisted, her voice rising. "You've manipulated everyone just like you manipulated Grandma, poor orphan Rachel, working so hard, so deserving of special treatment. It's all an act." "I was never orphaned," I said, confusion momentarily overriding embarrassment. "And I've worked for everything I've achieved." "Liar," she shouted, her face contorted with rage. "You stole what should have been shared among the family. You turned Grandma against us. And now you think you can sit in judgment of others." Before I could respond, she stepped forward and slapped me hard across the face. The crack echoed against the courthouse columns, followed by gasps from onlookers. The physical pain was sharp but secondary to the shock and humiliation burning through me. "You're nothing but a filthy animal who manipulated an old woman," Megan hissed, her voice low but cutting. "You don't belong up there making decisions about anyone's life." Two court security officers who had been watching from the entrance rushed forward, gently but firmly separating us. "Ma'am, you need to step back," one said to Megan while the other asked if I was all right. I stood frozen, my cheek throbbing, unable to process what had just happened. Colleagues I would soon be working alongside had witnessed my cousin physically assaulting me. The dignity of the position I was about to assume felt suddenly tarnished. "Do you want to press charges, Miss Michelle?" the security officer asked quietly. "That was assault, and we have plenty of witnesses." The question snapped me back to reality. Pressing charges would mean a police report, possibly a court case with me as the victim on the day of my judicial investiture. The headlines practically wrote themselves, and the family division would become irrevocably public. "No," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. "No charges, but she can't attend the ceremony." The officers nodded and escorted Megan toward the parking lot. She went without resistance, the fight seemingly drained from her after the slap. As she walked away, I saw her shoulders begin to shake with what might have been sobs. I stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, aware of curious and sympathetic eyes on me. My carefully applied makeup was probably ruined, my face certainly red where she had struck me. The urge to flee was nearly overwhelming, to get in my car and drive until this humiliation was far behind me. Judge Michelle, a court clerk I recognized, had approached cautiously. "Everyone's waiting inside. Your parents are getting worried." Judge Michelle. The title brought me back to myself and what this day meant. I had worked too hard, overcome too much to let this incident derail me now. "Thank you," I replied, straightening my shoulders and touching Grandma's brooch for strength. "I'll be right in, I just need a moment." I walked to a nearby bench and took several deep breaths, using techniques I had learned for calming nervous clients before court appearances. Tears threatened, but I blinked them back fiercely. I would not enter that courthouse crying on the day I became a judge. 5 minutes later, with my composure restored and a hastily applied concealer covering the redness on my cheek, I climbed the courthouse steps. Each one felt like a mountain, but also like a victory. Megan had wanted to shame me, to make me feel unworthy. With every step, I rejected that narrative. As I reached the top, I paused and looked back over the town where I had grown up, where Grandma Leaner had taught me about justice and dignity. Her voice seemed to whisper on the spring breeze, "Show them who you really are." I turned and walked through the doors, head held high, ready to take my place on the bench. In the privacy of the judicial chambers that would soon be mine, I finally allowed myself a moment of weakness. My hands trembled as I placed them flat on the polished oak desk, and the tears I had suppressed outside now threatened to ruin my makeup all over again. "Deep breaths," I whispered to myself, using the same calming technique I had employed with nervous witnesses. "In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The room still contained Judge Reynolds' personal items. He would clear them out next week after my formal investiture, but it already felt weighted with responsibility. Law books lined the walls, and the black judicial robe hung on a coat rack in the corner, waiting. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, quickly wiping my eyes. Catherine, the court clerk who had worked with Judge Reynolds for 15 years and would now be assigned to me, entered with a concerned expression. "Judge Michelle, are you all right? We heard about what happened outside." She carried a small first aid kit. "I thought you might need this." The kindness in her voice nearly undid my composure again. "I'm fine, Catherine, really, just a little shaken." "That woman had no right," Catherine said firmly, placing the kit on the desk and opening it to retrieve an instant cold pack. "Here, this will help with the swelling. Security has ensured she left the premises." I accepted the cold pack and held it gently against my cheek, which still burned from the slap. "She's my cousin," I admitted. "Family complications." Catherine's eyebrows rose, but her professional demeanor remained intact. "Family or not, it was assault on courthouse property. The officers said you declined to press charges." "It would only make things worse," I sighed. "And I don't want that kind of beginning to my judicial career." "Very well," Catherine nodded respectfully. "Your parents are waiting in the conference room with Judge Wilson and the Chief Judge. The ceremony is scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. Should I tell them you need more time?" I removed the cold pack and checked my reflection in a small mirror from my purse. The redness had faded somewhat, and with a touch more concealer, it would barely be noticeable. No, I'll be ready, I assured her. Could I just have 10 minutes alone? Of course, Judge. Catherine moved toward the door, then hesitated. If I may say so, what happened out there doesn't define you, how you respond to it does. After she left, I sat in the large leather chair behind the desk, trying to gather my thoughts. Megan's words echoed painfully. Filthy animal, manipulated an old woman, don't belong up there. The accusations weren't new, but having them hurled at me publicly, on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life, cut deeper than I wanted to admit. My eyes fell on Judge Reynolds' personal photos, still arranged on a side table. His family, his law school graduation, receiving his judicial appointment 30 years ago. A lifetime of service captured in frames. Would I ever feel I truly belonged in this position? Or would I always be haunted by the doubt Megan had tried to plant? I closed my eyes, seeking calm, and suddenly remembered Grandma Leaner's voice from years ago. When in doubt, Rachel, ask yourself what the law requires, what justice demands, and what compassion suggests. Where those three meet, you'll find your answer. The memory was so vivid I could almost smell her perfume, lavender and vanilla, comforting and dignified, just like her. Something made me reach into the pocket of my suit jacket, though I hadn't placed anything there. My fingers touched paper. Pulling it out, I found a small envelope I didn't recognize. Inside was a note in Grandma Leaner's distinctive handwriting. For your first day on the bench, justice requires both wisdom and compassion. You have always had both. I am so proud of you, my Rachel. Tears filled my eyes again, but different ones, cleansing rather than shameful. Mom must have slipped this into my pocket, saving it for today as Grandma had intended. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. With renewed determination, I stood and walked to the coat rack where the judicial robe hung. The heavy black fabric felt substantive in my hands, a tangible symbol of the responsibility I was about to assume. I slipped it on, adjusting the sleeves and feeling its weight settle on my shoulders. A glance in the mirror showed a different person than the one who had been slapped on the courthouse steps, not because the mark had faded, but because my eyes now held a clarity and purpose that transcended personal humiliation. This wasn't about me or Megan or our family drama. It was about serving justice with the integrity Grandma Leaner had instilled in me. Catherine knocked again, indicating it was time. I followed her through the back corridors of the courthouse to the conference room where my parents waited. Mom rushed to embrace me, her eyes questioning as she noticed the faint redness on my cheek. I'm okay, I assured her before she could ask. Thank you for the note. It was exactly what I needed. She wanted you to have it today, Mom said softly. She knew this day would come. The chief judge reviewed the ceremony procedure with me one final time, and then we processed into the courtroom. It was packed. Colleagues from the public defender's office, attorneys I had worked with and against, courthouse staff, and friends. My father beamed with undisguised pride from the front row. I was acutely aware that many present had witnessed the scene outside or heard about it through the courthouse grapevine. Some expressions held curiosity, others sympathy. A few of the attorneys who had seen the confrontation looked surprised by my composed demeanor, perhaps expecting me to have canceled the ceremony. The investiture itself passed in a blur of solemn words and promises. I repeated the judicial oath with clear conviction, feeling the weight of each phrase. When the chief judge presented me with my official credentials and invited me to take the bench for the first time, a hush fell over the courtroom. The 3 steps to the judicial platform seemed steeper than they had during my years as an advocate. As I settled into my chair now, and looked out over the assembled crowd, I experienced a surreal moment of dissonance. Just an hour ago, I had been publicly humiliated on the steps of this very building. Now I sat in the position of highest authority in the room. The cognitive distance between those two realities might have been paralyzing. Instead, I found it clarifying. Both experiences were part of who I was: the vulnerable human who could be hurt by family rejection, and the judicial officer sworn to uphold the law impartially. Acknowledging both made me stronger, not weaker. Thank you all for being here today, I began, my voice steady and carrying to the back of the courtroom. I am deeply honored by the trust placed in me, and I promise to administer justice with integrity, impartiality, and compassion. I paused, then added something unplanned. We all come to this courtroom as complete human beings, with our personal histories and imperfections. What matters is not that we are perfect, but that we strive for fairness and dignity in all our dealings. That is my commitment to you as I assume this position. A spontaneous round of applause followed, started by my former colleagues from the public defender's office and spreading throughout the courtroom. In their faces, I saw not pity for what had happened outside, but respect for how I had handled it. The rest of the day unfolded with a small reception, congratulations from colleagues, and finally, my first official act as judge reviewing emergency motions that couldn't wait for my formal start date the following Monday. By the time I returned to chambers to change out of my robe, exhaustion had caught up with me, but so had a profound sense of accomplishment. Catherine knocked and entered with a cup of tea. Judge Reynolds always had tea at the end of the day, she explained. I thought you might like to start your own tradition. Thank you, I said sincerely. I think I'll keep that one, it's a good tradition. You did well today, she said, her professional reserve softening slightly, especially considering the circumstances. Life doesn't always give us perfect beginnings, I replied, sipping the tea. We work with what we have. After Catherine left, I stood at the window of my chambers, looking out at the courthouse square as twilight descended. The sting of Megan's slap had faded completely, replaced by the memory of the oath I had taken and the responsibility I now carried. Grandma Alina had been right. I had found my place on the bench, despite the obstacles and painful family divisions. Or perhaps, in some ways, because of them. Those experiences had shaped my understanding of human frailty and the importance of fair treatment, lessons I would carry into every case I heard. I carefully folded my robe, placed Grandma's note in my desk drawer where I would see it each morning, and turned out the lights on my first day as Judge Rachel Michelle. 6 months into my judicial tenure, I had established a routine and reputation. Attorneys who appeared before me commented on my thorough preparation, balanced temperament, and practical approach to case management. The courthouse staff had gradually shifted from calling me Judge Michelle to simply Judge, a small but significant sign of acceptance into the judicial community. The family situation remained complicated. My parents created separate holiday celebrations to accommodate the ongoing rift, and most relatives had chosen sides in the conflict. I tried to focus on my work rather than dwelling on the estrangement, but the absence of family connections left a hollow space that professional success couldn't fill. Then came the letter from the State Judicial Ethics Committee. My hands trembled as I opened the official envelope in my chambers one Tuesday morning. Inside was a formal notification that a complaint had been filed against me, alleging I had manipulated my grandmother for financial gain and therefore lacked the moral character required for judicial office. The committee had already conducted a preliminary investigation and found insufficient evidence to proceed further. The complaint was dismissed. But the damage was done. Someone had tried to undermine my judicial position by dredging up family history. Though the complaint was anonymous, I knew immediately who had filed it. The specific allegations mirrored exactly what Megan had shouted on the courthouse steps 6 months earlier. The timing just as I was establishing myself on the bench was strategic, designed to destabilize me just as I was finding my footing. I placed the letter in my desk drawer and tried to focus on the day's docket, but my concentration kept slipping. The vindictiveness required to attempt to destroy my career over a years-old inheritance dispute felt incomprehensible. What had I done to deserve such hatred from my own cousin? That evening, I was still wrestling with these questions when my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the peephole, I saw Aunt Patricia standing on my porch. Megan's mother, whom I hadn't spoken to directly in nearly 3 years. "May I come in?" she asked when I opened the door, her expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "I think it's time we talked." I led her to the living room, the same room where Grandma Alina had shared legal stories with me throughout my childhood. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke. "I owe you an apology, Rachel," she began, surprising me, "for many things, but especially for not stepping in sooner to address Megan's behavior." "Did you know about the ethics complaint?" I asked directly. Aunt Patricia closed her eyes briefly. "That's why I'm here. She told me about it last night, thinking I would be proud of her for, I don't even know what, taking action, getting revenge." I was horrified. "The committee dismissed it," I said, "but if it had gained traction, it could have seriously damaged my career." "I know," she acknowledged, "and it was completely unjustified. That's why I'm here. This has gone too far, and it needs to stop." She took a deep breath before continuing. "Megan has been struggling for years professionally, personally. She's been in therapy for the past few months, which is why she finally told me about the complaint. Her therapist has been helping her see that her issues with you are really about her own insecurities. I'm glad she's getting help, I said cautiously. But that doesn't excuse trying to destroy my career. No, it doesn't, Aunt Patricia agreed firmly. Nothing excuses that. Or the scene at the courthouse, which I only learned about recently. I'm deeply ashamed that my daughter would behave that way. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Aunt Patricia revealed things I hadn't known: how Megan had attempted law school herself right after college but dropped out after 1 semester, finding the work too demanding. How she had always felt measured against my accomplishments by the extended family. How her father's business had faced financial difficulties in recent years, removing the safety net she had always taken for granted. None of this is your fault, Aunt Patricia emphasized. You earn everything you've achieved through hard work and determination. Megan needs to accept that and find her own path instead of resenting yours. Before leaving, she asked if I would be willing to meet with Megan, not immediately, but after some additional therapy sessions and with a clear understanding that any reconciliation would be on my terms. I can't promise anything, I told her honestly, but I'm willing to listen. 3 weeks later, I sat nervously at a table in a private room at a local restaurant, waiting for Megan to arrive. We had agreed to meet on neutral ground with Aunt Patricia present initially. My stomach knotted with anxiety. What if this was another setup for public humiliation? When Megan entered, I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished, confident facade she had always maintained. She looked thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, and her usual designer outfit replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Most strikingly, her expression held none of the contempt I had grown accustomed to seeing. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said quietly as she sat down, not quite meeting my eye. "I'm here to listen," I replied neutrally. Aunt Patricia squeezed her daughter's hand encouragingly, then excused herself after a few minutes of small talk, leaving us alone as planned. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Megan finally spoke. "I filed an ethics complaint against you," she admitted directly. "It was wrong, vindictive, and potentially harmful to your career. I'm sorry." The straightforward acknowledgement caught me off guard. I had expected denials or minimization. "Why?" I asked simply. "What did I ever do to make you hate me so much?" Megan's eyes filled with tears. "It wasn't really about you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was about me, always about me. I was so jealous of you, your focus, your drive, the way Grandma Leaner admired you. The way everyone admired you. You had everything I didn't," I pointed out. "Private school, college without student loans, family connections." "I had things," she corrected. "You had purpose, and when Grandma left you the house and money, it confirmed what I always feared, that you were better than me in ways that actually mattered." We talked for hours, peeling back layers of misunderstanding and hurt that had accumulated over decades. I learned that Megan had interpreted my dedicated studying as judgment of her more social lifestyle. She revealed her failed attempt at law school, undertaken partly to prove she could succeed in my world. "The day I dropped out was the day I decided to hate you completely," she admitted. "It was easier than facing my own shortcoming." "I never knew you wanted to be a lawyer," I said, genuinely surprised. "You always seemed to dismiss my interest in it." "Classic projection," she said with a self-deprecating smile. "My therapist has a field day with me." When the conversation turned to Grandma Leaner's will, Megan shocked me again. "Did you know she tried to explain her decision to me before she died?" she asked. "What? No, I had no idea." "She called me to the hospital one day when you weren't there," Megan explained. "She told me she was leaving you the house and savings because you needed it to establish yourself without debt, while I had family resources to fall back on. She said it wasn't about loving one grandchild more than another, but about equalizing opportunity." "She never told me that," I said softly. "I dismissed it at the time," Megan continued. "Told myself she was manipulated or confused. It was easier than accepting her reasoning, which meant acknowledging my own privileges." The conversation wasn't a magical fix for years of conflict. There were tense moments and painful acknowledgments on both sides. I admitted that my rigidity and focus on achievement had sometimes made me seem judgmental, even when I hadn't intended to be. Megan acknowledged that her resentment had morphed into destructive behavior that hurt not only me but our entire family. "I don't expect us to be best friends," she said as we prepared to leave. "I've done too much damage for that. But I am genuinely sorry, and I'm working to be better." "I appreciate that," I replied honestly. "And I'm willing to try for a civil relationship, one step at a time." Our reconciliation was gradual and imperfect. We began with occasional text messages, then coffee every few weeks. The first family gathering we both attended was tense but civil. Over time, the sharp edges of resentment began to soften, though the easy closeness of childhood would never fully return. 6 months after our initial meeting, Megan asked if she could see my courtroom while court wasn't in session. I arranged for her to visit one afternoon after the docket was complete. She sat quietly in the gallery as I finished paperwork at the bench, looking around at the formal setting with curious eyes. "Does it feel powerful?" she asked when the last clerk had left. "Sitting up there, making decisions that affect people's lives?" I considered the question seriously. "Not powerful in the way you might think," I answered. "It feels like a heavy responsibility. Every decision impacts someone's life, sometimes dramatically. I never forget that." She nodded thoughtfully. "I think I understand now why Grandma Leaner believed you were meant for this. You see it as service, not authority." "That's exactly what she taught me," I agreed, touching the brooch I still wore on my robe. "Justice requires both wisdom and compassion." Megan smiled slightly. "She used to say that to me too, though I didn't really listen. I was too busy wanting things instead of understanding what mattered." As we left the courtroom together, I realized how much we had both grown from the painful experience that had divided us. Megan had faced her insecurities and was building a life based on self-acceptance rather than comparison. I had learned that professional achievement without family connection left an emptiness that no judicial title could fill. Most importantly, I had discovered that true justice included the possibility of redemption not just in my courtroom, but in my personal life as well. The path from being slapped on the courthouse steps to finding peace with my cousin had been long and difficult, but ultimately healing. Today, as I don the judicial robe and take my place on the bench, I carry not only Grandma Leaner's brooch but also her deeper legacy, the understanding that justice and compassion must work together, in courtrooms and in families. Some wounds take time to heal, but with patience and understanding, even the deepest family divisions can begin to mend. Have you ever had to forgive someone who deeply hurt you? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this journey of overcoming family conflict resonated with you. Remember, sometimes our greatest professional and personal growth comes from our most painful challenges. Thank you for listening, and I wish you wisdom and compassion in your own journey toward healing.